Raise your hand if you've ever been busy. Raise your hand if you've ever got tired and feel like you just need a couple days off. Most people would have both hands up right now. That's our world, fast-paced and income-driven. That's why we get caught up in our own lives so often, and that's why it's understandable when most people don't focus on worries that aren't their own. So what makes someone become a humanitarian? Someone whose whole life focuses on the welfare of other humans.
When you go back and you see kids that were living on the streets, kids had no structure, they had no routine, people who had nothing, they didn't have meals. When you see that they're all of a sudden they're waking up, they have structure, they have something to do, they have a meal in their belly, their life changes completely. They, like I said, their self-esteem changes, their self-worth, their ability to know who they are in the world and what they have the potential of becoming. You know, to give that hope, to give that dream, and then to watch people actually use that to do good for themselves and others it's amazing. It becomes an addiction.
And with Serena's help, we'll find the meaning of life to a humanitarian.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Pursuing Profit with Principles. I'm your host, Regina Bergman. I am excited to bring you today a little more information about the International Women's Day and Women's History Month. And if you noticed the commercials before our show came on, you saw a lot of things that had to do with Women's History Month and International Women's Day, and the contributions that women have made and are making in the world. It's exciting to be a part of that. But you know, I wasn't always aware of International Women's Day. It really hadn't entered my consciousness so much until last year. But this year I decided to do a little research on the subject, and I want to share some of the results of that research with you and share what some folks are doing today to make a difference in the world in terms of equality for everyone, but in particular, equality for women at this point. You know, I have been a business owner for many years. Since 1996, my businesses have included a staffing firm, a regional staffing firm that had 6 offices. Then I had a bed and breakfast on Lake Bridgeport and an event center on the lake. And then I now have my current business, Bridgeport Strategy, which is a business coaching firm. And in all of those businesses, the ratio of men to women that I employed was very high. Most of my employees were women, and occasionally there were some men in the mix. But I honestly fell in love with working with women, which can be difficult because so oftentimes in today's world, women are focused more, especially in the corporate world, focused more on competition than cooperation. And one of the things that I really focused on in my business was was us all understanding the strengths that we brought, each of us individually, to the organization, and that each woman was unique, each person was unique, and they were hired based upon the skill sets that they brought and who they were. Actually used a very impactful personality profile as part of my hiring. And so I knew and understood each of these people before they came onto my payroll. I really understood who they were, where the conflicts could be with other staff members. And we worked hard to make sure that those conflicts were kept to a minimum and that we worked as a team and we worked in cooperation with one another. And as we did that, we were able to bring value to each other, bring value to the organization, bring value to our clients. We made a difference in everyone's lives. And that I carried that philosophy through no matter what business I was in. But today I want to talk about International Women's Day and Women's History Month. Now, Women's History Month is the third month of the year, and March 8th is International Women's Day. We've been acknowledging International Women's Day for over 100 years. I cannot believe I was so slow coming to the party on this one. Over 100 years. We have been honoring, this holiday has been honoring half of the population and has celebrated women's social, economic, cultural, and political achievements. Its mission is to highlight activities that encourage women to pursue goals without bias or barriers. Without bias or barriers. All over the world, groups come together to fundraise for women-centric charities and raise awareness about women's equality. Now, I'm going to attempt to be a bit techie today, so bear with me. I actually have a little slideshow to go along with what we have today. And let me see if I can get it up here properly. There we go. And okay, so let's see. I think I actually didn't get it quite the way I wanted it, but let me see here. Let me stop that and try that one more time. And I may need some help from Miss Barb, but I think it will work. I think we'll be all right. So International Women's Day. Let's talk about it. Hopefully you can see my slide. I can see it there. Very good. That's what I was looking for. All right. So as I said, I wasn't particularly aware of it until last year. I was introduced by Bernie Floresca to Pearl Cox of POW, Pearls of Wisdom, out of the UK. And Pearl did an amazing program last year on International Women's Day that included interviewing people on her podcast, as well as she put together several panels of women discussing topics relative to women's equality. And I had the opportunity to be interviewed by her on her podcast, as well as to participate in several of those panels. Again, that raised my awareness. But let's start. I want to mention first, before I go into this story, that the theme this year is breaking the bias. And we're talking about any kinds of bias that impact women in the workplace and women in the world and equality of things. There's so many things that are impacted by inequality, and we'll talk a little bit about those later on in the show. But it is amazing when you dive into this worldwide, the impact and the reasons that it's so important that we come together and support these projects. But let's first talk about the history of International Women's Day. As I mentioned, it goes back over 100 years. And I found this story about it on history.com by Christopher Klein, and it's called The Strike That Shook America. And I'd like to share that with you. So the setting is Lawrence, Massachusetts, and we're in the mills where they make fabric. Uh, here's his story. Power looms that thundered inside the cotton weaving room of Everett Mill in Lawrence, Massachusetts, suddenly fell silent on January the 11th, 1912. When a mill official demanded to know why workers were standing motionless next to their machines, the explanation was simple: not enough pay. The workers who had opened their pay envelopes that morning or that afternoon discovered their weekly wages had been reduced by 32 cents. A newly enacted Massachusetts law had reduced the work week of women and children from 56 to 54 hours a week. Think about that, folks. 56 hours a week. These women and children are working. But the mill owners, unlike in the past, cut the workers' wages proportionately. For workers who were only averaging $8.76 per week, every penny was precious, and 32 cents made the difference between eating a meal or going hungry, or letting your children go hungry. Word of the strike by the women of the Everett Mill swept through Lawrence's squalid tenements that night, and the following morning the walkout cascaded through neighboring mills. Even above the loom's deafening din, the shouts of the strikers could be heard. Short pay! All out! All out! In spite of Arctic temperatures, bad blood boiled over. Knife-wielding strikers overwhelmed security gates and slashed machine belts, threads, and cloth. They tore bobbins and shuttles off machines. Through the falling snow, rioting workers shattered windows with bricks and ice. Police beat them back with billy clubs. At the end of the day, let's see here, I'm trying to advance our slide. Give me just a second here. I want you to see this next slide. I have to switch screens. There we go. By the end of the day, end of January the 12th, more than 10,000 workers were out on strike. Their numbers swelled the following week. Thousands of strikers, their numb feet crunching on the snow, chanted and sang protest songs as they paraded through the streets. Lines of state militiamen protected the massive brick mills with the spears of their bayonets pointed squarely at the picket lines of the strikers who protested outside. Women didn't shy away from the protests. They delivered fiery rally speeches and marched in picket lines and parades. The banners they carried demanding both living wages and dignity. "We want bread and roses too," gave the work stoppage its name, the Bread and Roses Strike. Lawrence, known as Immigrant City, was a true American melting pot with residents from 51 nations wedged into 7 square miles. Although strikers lacked a common culture and language, they remained united in a common cause. The social networks of the day, which were soup kitchens, ethnic organizations, and community halls, stitched the patchwork of strikers together. And once news of the walkout went viral in newspapers around the country, American laborers took up collections for the strikers, and local farmers arrived with food donations. Mill owners and city leaders hired men to foment trouble and even planted dynamite in an attempt to discredit the workers. Lawrence's simmering cauldron finally bubbled over on January the 29th when a mob of strikers attacked a streetcar carrying workers who didn't honor the picket line. That afternoon, as police battled strikers, an errant gunshot struck and killed Anna Lopezzo. The following day, 18-year-old John Ramey died after being stabbed in the shoulder by a soldier's bayonet. With the city on a hair trigger, striking families sent 119 of their children out of harm's way to Manhattan on February the 10th to live with relatives, or in some cases with complete strangers who could provide food and a safe shelter. A cheering crowd of 5,000 greeted the children at Grand Central Terminal. And after a second trainload arrived from Lawrence the following week, the children paraded down Fifth Avenue. The children's exodus proved to be a publicity coup for the workers, and Lawrence authorities intended to halt it. When families brought another 48 or 46 children bound for Philadelphia to the city's train station on February the 24th, the city marshal ordered them to disperse. When defiant mothers still tried to get their children aboard the train and resisted the authorities, police dragged them by the hair, beat them with clubs, and arrested them as their horrified children looked on in tears. The national reaction to this was visceral and marked a turning point in the Bread and Roses strike. President Taft asked his attorney general to investigate, and Congress began a hearing on the strike on March 2nd. Striking workers, including children who dropped out of school at age 14 or younger to work in the factories, described the brutal working conditions and poor pay inside the Lawrence mills. One-third of mill workers, whose life expectancy was less than 40 years, died within a decade of taking their jobs. If death didn't come slowly through respiratory infections such as pneumonia or tuberculosis from inhaling dust and lint, it would come swiftly in workplace accidents that took lives and limbs. 14-year-old Camilla Tioli shocked lawmakers by recounting how a mill machine had torn off her scalp and left her hospitalized for 7 months. After the children's testimony, public tide turned in favor of the strikers for good. The mill owners were ready for a deal and agreed to many of the workers' demands. The two sides agreed to a 15% wage hike, a bump in overtime compensation, and a promise not to retaliate against strikers. On March 14th, the 9-week strike ended as 15,000 workers gathered on Lawrence Common shouted their agreement to accept the offer. Only 5 sounded their dissents. The Bread and Roses strike was not just a victory for Lawrence workers. By the end of March, 275,000 New England textile workers received similar raises, and other industries followed suit. Wow, what a history, right? I mean, I had no idea, absolutely no idea that that was the history of this holiday, this event. Holiday's the wrong word. This event, this time to remind us of where we've come from, where we are, and where we want to go. So I want to share with you a little more of this history and just kind of take a look here. Oops, let's go back. Some of the milestones. So first of all, you know, prior to the Bread and Roses strike in 1911, in 1908, there was already great unrest and critical debate was occurring amongst women. Women's oppression and inequality was spurring women to become more vocal and active in campaigning for change. Then in 1908, 15,000 women marched through New York City demanding shorter hours, better pay, and voting rights. In 1909, in accordance with a declaration by the Socialist Party of America, the first National Women's Day was observed. And in 1910, attendees at the Second International Conference of Working Women, a gathering of women from activists and political organizations in Copenhagen, approved the idea of an International Day for Women. Several European countries observed the day the next year on March 19th. And the earliest Women's Day events included rallies for the right to vote and against gender discrimination, as well as women's anti-war protests and strikes in Russia. March 8th was picked for the holiday's official date, as it lined up with Russian women's first observance of the day. Now, at the time, Russia used a different calendar, and the date was actually different on that calendar. Now, several things have have taken place there. You see on the screen a little more about that conference. Over 100 women from 17 countries representing unions, socialist parties, working women's club, and including the first 3 women elected to the Finnish parliament. Okay, so then in 1911, there was, following that decision from that decision agreed in Copenhagen, International Women's Day was celebrated. Oops, sorry about that, folks. Celebrated for the first time in Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Switzerland. And we go on. On the eve of World War I in 1913 and 14, there was campaigning for peace, and Russian women observed their first International Women's Day. Now I'm going to go back up here to this picture while I share a little bit more of this. 1917, Russian women began a strike for bread and peace in response to the death of over 2 million Russian soldiers in World War I. Opposed by political leaders, the women continued to strike until 4 days later, the Tsar was forced to abdicate and the provisional government granted women the right to vote. The date the women's strike commenced was Sunday, February the 23rd on the Julian calendar, then in use in Russia. But elsewhere, it's on the Gregorian calendar, it was March the 8th. And then we don't have a lot of historical information from 1917 to 1975, which is when it was first celebrated in the United Nations. And then in December of 1977, the General Assembly adopted a resolution proclaiming a United Nations Day for Women's Rights and International Peace to be observed on any day of the year by member states in accordance with their historical and national traditions. Now, the UN announced their first annual theme celebrating the past. Let's see, I want to make a change here, folks. I'm going to take us off of the screen share. So from 1975, 1977, then we kind of jump up to 1996. And in 1996, the UN announced their first annual theme of celebrating the past, planning for the future, which was followed in 1997 with Women at the Peace Table, and in 1998, Women and Human Rights, and in 1999, World Free of Violence Against Women. And so on. Every year there is a new theme for this event. Now in 2000, in the new millennium, there was little activity occurring for International Women's Day in most countries. The world had moved on, and in many spheres, feminism wasn't a popular topic. Something was needed to reignite International Women's Day, giving it the respect it deserves and to raise awareness amongst the masses. There was urgent work to do. Battles had not been won, and gender parity still had not been achieved. In 2001, the International Women's Day.com platform was launched with the specific purpose of re-energizing the day. And that focus continues today, celebrating and making visible the achievements of women while continuing the call for accelerating gender parity. The website, which is internationalwomensday.com, provides useful guidance and resources. It adopts an annual campaign theme that is globally relevant for groups and organizations. And the campaign theme, one of many around the world, provides a framework and direction for annual International Women's Day activities and takes into account the wider agenda of both celebration as well as the call to action for gender parity. So we've heard some of those themes. Some others are choose to challenge, each for equal, balance for better, press for progress, behold for change, and it goes on. Now, this website also serves as a significant vehicle for charities. And in 2020, a hefty six-figure sum was fundraised with 100% of the donations going to charity. The International Women's Day website's charities of choice are the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts and Catalyst Incorporated, the global working women's organization since 2017, which sees the charitable fundraising opened up more widely to further registered charities around the world. So this year, what's happening this year? Here's some things for you to think about this year. Let's see. Let's go back to our screen. And I want to come down here. So here are some things for you to think about this year. Imagine a gender equal world. What would that look like? You know, as I was doing this research and looking at various organizations and charities and things that were associated with this, one of the things that surprised me was a site about vision. And I thought, vision? What does that have to do with this? There are 112 million more women with vision problems or blindness than men. When you look at their site, they walk you through why some of that is. A lot of it has to do with financial disparity, with that difference in what women and men earn and the opportunities available to women. Some of it had to do with transportation, and it was more difficult for women to get transportation. And of course, it's a global thing. It's not here in the States, it's not in any one country, it's a global issue. So imagine a world where gender-wise, we are equal. We're on a level playing field in terms of many things, but in terms of how we're treated in the workplace and in terms of equal work for equal pay for equal work. I think I said that backwards. Imagine a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive, a world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, doing these things, we can forge women's equality, but I would take it a step beyond that. All of this pertains to all people, not women, not men, not difference in the skin colors, but all of us. A world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination for everyone. A world that is diverse, equitable, inclusive for everyone, where our differences are valued and celebrated. Collectively, we can break the bias. Individually, we are responsible for our own thoughts and actions all day, every day. So I encourage us to be the change we want to see. Do the things that you want to see in the world. We can break the bias in our communities. We can break it in our workplaces, in our schools, our colleges, and our universities. So, one other element that I would like to bring into this conversation is service. One of the commercials you saw before my show had to do with philanthropy. And service is such an important part of our lives, providing service. And as we provide service, in whatever way that may be, whether that's our time and our energy, our resources, our dollars, whatever that is, as we provide service to make change in the world, we learn leadership skills. We develop new talents such as teaching, public speaking, planning, and organizing. We learn charity and kindness and honesty and responsibility. So again, get involved. Be the change you want to see. Now, what does all this have to do with pursuing profit with principles? I think it's pretty clear, beginning with the bread and roses strike. As business owners, we have an obligation to treat our employees with dignity and respect, to provide a safe working environment, to develop the skills and abilities of our employees. As we do so, we will have a more profitable business, and we will elevate the status of those who work for us. We're going to show you here in just a second the link that you can go to International Women's Day and check it out for yourselves. There's so many things on that site, and um, use it as a way to understand. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's so kind. Great history lesson. Thank you for sharing this about International Women's Day. Thank you, whoever said that. You know, it was an important history lesson for me to learn, and I hope that it was valuable for everybody listening. So with that, as I said, we'll have the link to internationalwomensday.com for you. It'll be in the comments. And have an amazing day. Go out and be the difference that you want to see in the world, and make a difference through serving others and through being aware of what is happening around you. Bye for now. See you next week.
Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me yet again for another episode of Marketing and Mindset. Happy Monday. I am your host, America Supermom. I am so excited to be here today because today's topic is the power of active listening. Now, I could have just said listening. You know, we throw this term around a lot. I definitely use it a lot with my kids, right? It's like, are you listening to me? I am telling you this over and over again, but it seems to be no interaction here, like something's not connecting. How many times I have to tell you to come and get this trash, or take your plate and put it in the sink, or, when are you going to start your chore? All these different things that we could say because we feel like someone is not listening. So one of the things that I often have asked my children as I was trying to teach them this, right? I think we all kind of have this situation to where it depends on our mood, right? If we are engaged in other activity, if we are actually listening to what someone is saying to us, right? So I asked my kids, how do you know if somebody is listening to you? And they say, well, if they do what you ask or whatever that situation is. So if your outcome is that you want somebody to grab something out of the kitchen, for example, if you're eating and you need a utensil or something that you're going to put on your food, salt and pepper or ketchup, right? You know if they're listening if you ask them something and then they come back with whatever you've asked them for, right? So that means they heard you, but they listened because they actually followed through with the action. Now, so for me, this was really a profound thing to realize, right? Because a lot of times we hear people, we hear the noise in the background or whatever it is, but we actually listen, right? So this is kind of what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, I just want to introduce myself to those of you that may not know me. I am America's Supermom, and as I gave that illustration about kids, my husband and I have 15 of them, and we have 10 of them that still live at home. So this is definitely a topic that I struggle with, not only for myself, but with my kids or, business situations. The list can go on and on. But what I like to do as America's Supermom is to create strategies for moms and women to deal with life's obstacles with a smile instead of stress. So I'm all about mental wellness because I've had a lifetime, it seems like, of getting it wrong. For 13 years, I struggled with depression, hospitalized 3 times, and now I'm about sharing my message to other women so that they can use the tools and lessons that I've learned and avoid that pitfall that I ran into in so many different areas. So today, one of the pitfalls is to not actively listen to other people. So I'm going to pull up some slides here really quickly so we can kind of get into today's topic. So I hope everybody is doing fantabulous today. All right. So today we're going to be talking about this active listening. Now, the first thing that I have here is a quote. I was challenged in a clubhouse room by Les Brown to come up with a mantra, something that you really want to lead yourself with every day. And so I came up with a life without excuses as a mindset for greatness. Because as a mother with 15 children, right, I could come up with a million excuses. Oh, I can't do it because of the kids. Or, oh, I can't do it because I'm short. Oh, I can't do it because, I'm a stay home mom. So I got to do the things of a stay home mom. I mean, just the list can go on and on. So I just realized that everybody has a story, right? We just don't have to get stuck in that story. You could be a stay home mom, but it's not that you don't have any freedom. Maybe it's just that you need to organize your day a little differently, right? So that you can have time for the things that matter to you and matter to your family. So it doesn't have to be a stopping point for you of not being able to explore the things that matter to you. So this is the mantra, living beyond excuses. So when we think about active listening, okay, we want to think about what is it exactly. When I think about active listening, as you see in this picture, they're all giving eye contact or getting engaged in this conversation so that they can have a desired outcome. You think about it when you have meetings, what are some things that you want to accomplish from being together in this conversation, meeting, whatever that looks like, right? So this is a desired outcome that we are probably going for collectively. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a need for a meeting, right? But some of the things that interfere with us to actively listen, this is just a few, right? This is what came off the top of it for me. But there could be another number of things that just keep you distracted from being able to totally connect with the person that you are in a conversation with or the group of people or whatever. So the first thing is eye contact. So we know this so much, right? With our children, it's like, I'm trying to talk to you, your spouse or whoever, right? Friends. You sometimes feel like you're second place to the cell phone or a laptop or a book or something they're writing or anything like that. No eye contact is one of the obstacles that is really an indication that we're not getting through or connecting with the other person. The next thing is hunger. Have you ever been listening to someone or trying to? You're giving them eye contact, but your stomach is growling. You're like, man, what am I going to eat? When am I going to eat? Can I just interrupt them really quickly so I can go get me a cracker or something, right? Hunger can be an obstacle. If you have to go to the restroom, someone is really trying to get into a heated conversation or whatever that looks like, that it's something that is extending for a longer amount of time than what you feel you can give because you have to use the restroom. The other thing is worry, right? Maybe you are engaged in thinking about what are you going to do next? Maybe it's something that you don't have the answers to. You're in a meeting and you're afraid that they're going to ask for your report that you don't have done. So you just kind of disengaged. And then the next thing could be fear. Oh my goodness, what if they're going to ask me a question or speak in front of everybody, right? Or I have to share my point and I haven't really had time to think about it. The list can go on and on, like I said. So these are just a few. So these are some of the obstacles that hinder our ability to actively listen. So we want to think about what can we do to work on this, right? When we think about these obstacles, everybody has them, right? Everybody has them. So one of the things is to really recognize what some of those obstacles are. And when we see them in other people, in addition to ourselves. So for example, if I see that someone is not giving me eye contact, then I can pause and wait and ask, is this not a good time? Can we schedule a different time that might be more convenient? But oftentimes I can only say it myself, right? Because I don't know about anybody I'm talking to. I just know we all struggle at some point. That I would be so engaged in what I want to communicate that when I realized that they weren't listening or whatever, they gave me some clues that I could have just stopped, paused, and said, can we come up with a better time? Because this could be another issue. We just infringe on people. We just assume, hey, because we've been mulling over this idea, thought, or whatever, that just because we want to share it at that time, it may not be convenient for the other person who is listening, right? So we have to begin to consider our own behavior in light of how this listening behavior is taking place. So this is how we can work on this. We really can create an action plan. All right. And that consists of a few things. Focusing. So if you think back to the image that I just showed with the gentleman who had his headphones on, okay, there didn't seem to be anything else around. That's the mindset that we have to have. Now, you don't actually have to put headphones on, not unless it's a conversation and you're on a computer or maybe your phone and you need to block out some outside distraction or noise, right? But the main thing is to focus. Now, that could look differently. That could be, put down your phone, give them eye contact. It could be, clear the stuff off your desk. It could be to sit down and stop doing what you're doing. If you are engaged in exercise or something and someone's talking to you, stopping what you're doing and giving them eye contact, anything that requires you to really engage in the other person. That is the first step with focus. The next thing is to ask questions, right? We have this app called Clubhouse. And so we get up on a stage and then we have an audience. But when you're on stage, there's other people that may be on the stage with you. And so when you're going over a topic, you don't want to talk at people and just say a list of things that you want them to do or points you want to make, a lot of times without allowing them to engage. So if I'm explaining a concept that other people may not be aware of or even considered, why would I not give them the opportunity to ask questions, right? So if they say, oh, is this something you did recently, or was this when you were younger? You want to have the ability to ask questions to interact with one another, right? We just don't want to talk at someone. We want it to be a conversation, something that we both could learn from. The next thing is don't interrupt. How often do you feel like, oh, what you're going to say, or you know what the other person's going to say? So you try to finish their sentence, or, you have an idea and you just want to blurt it out before you forget it, right? So one thing that you can do in those situations that can help with the interrupting, and I've learned this a lot as a podcast host, right? Because you can get all excited and, oh, that's a great point. But what you simply want to do is just write it down, right? Get a journal, notebook paper, anything where you could be taking notes, and you can write down that point, let them complete their thought, and then ask a question or follow up statement so that you can continue whatever that point might have been in a way that allows the other person to be fully engaged as well as yourself. And then another thing you could do, and again, this list is only a few things. These are some few recommendations that I would say, but you feel free to add, take away whatever works for you. But the last thing is to repeat what you heard, right? This is great because, so often we have people that struggle with sharing their story. I know I did. I went through this point of, I cannot be an author. That is just not my thing. I'm comparing myself to Shakespeare, Mark Twain, some of these other classic authors that I grew up studying in school. And so when I compared myself to them, I thought, man, my story is definitely not that, right? I just couldn't write like that. That's just not my gift. So that really was what a struggle that I had to overcome with being telling my own story, right? So I got into this point where I had a collaborative, right? I was in this book, I was in 3 different collaboratives. And now I'm on the phase of doing my own story. But I had to overcome that hurdle of really reframing what an author looked like to me because I just didn't feel like I fit that mold. So a lot of times when we think about the actual conversations that we have, we really need to engage in a way that really allows us to reflect and think about, what is my perspective, or what was my perspective on this? And is it serving me? Is there something else that I can kind of come to terms with and think about that might be more advantageous for me when I think about my goal of actively listening? Now, as we go through this whole thing of, finding the ways that we can facilitate and make it better, we also want to read the signs. What is someone's tone of voice? What are the words that they're using? What is their body language, right? These are also some clues to help us to understand, is the person getting what I'm saying? Do they understand it? Are there any questions? Do they seem like they're interested, right? We have all different kinds of presentations that we make, whether it is selling someone something or, giving them some advice or a product or service. We want to make sure that there is a connection, right? That we are getting our point across, that they are actually understanding what we're saying. So reading the signs is very important. And so often, this is one of the major things that we overlook, and it hinders our ability to be active participants in conversation with active listening, right? So if you have a conversation with someone, and as we see the picture with the young lady, she does not look like she is really reacting in a positive way, right? Her body language, it looks like she is spewing out things in a loud tone, right? So when we're reading the signs, we can decide, hey, you know what, this person appears to be upset. this, to me, probably is not the best time for us to engage in this conversation. Acknowledging where they're at, how they're feeling would be perfect. And then saying, I want to give space for this, to give you some time to think about it. It's evident that maybe this isn't the right time right now. And we can table this and come back in a manner that is better for you and me. Because I understand that you may be upset. However, one of my boundaries is I just cannot deal with people yelling at me. Now, even if your anger might be warranted, I feel like it is not appropriate for you to be yelling at me. So we can table this for a time when maybe you're a little bit calmer, and able to express your thoughts without yelling, something like that. So we want to be able to read the signs so that we don't kind of lose sight of the goal, which is to communicate whatever point that might be, right? But if we don't read the signs, we're going to get engaged with their emotional cycle that they may be on, and it may not serve a positive outcome. So we want to think about where are they at? What are the signs so that we know how to navigate? See, one of the things when it comes to active listening is really being able to kind of get a sense and awareness of the atmosphere. What's really going on here? Okay, I know what I want to do, but are the roads leading to that destination, right? Am I looking at the outcome that I want to see? Or, am I having some kind of challenges with that? And they may not be your challenges. They could be the challenges of the other person. So we want to think about when it comes to active listening, where everybody can be a winner, where we can all be in a place to where we understand all the ideas that we decided were relevant with whatever outcome that we were trying to build on. So when we think about active listening, it is a situation where, the outcome that we desired is accomplished, and we're able to explore a way that works out where everybody is a winner, right? It's not just me. It is a situation where everybody wins. We are able to have a healthy dialogue with an outcome that benefits both of us. So I hope that was beneficial for everybody as we think about active listening, that it requires both parties to be engaged in the conversation and what they desire to accomplish. So I challenge you to think about ways that you could actively listen. And one of my biggest takeaways is to have something to write down your thoughts or capture what that person said in a manner so that you can pause, you can give time to reflect, and you can really engage in healthy conversation, all because we have learned how to actively listen to the other person. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching today. And I just pray that this insight was good for you. I was setting my timer, y'all, because I can be long winded. I could just go on and talk about topics, and it's like, I forgot to even set a timer, right? So we want to think about ways that we can benefit our audience or whoever it is that we're talking to in a manner that serves us and them. If you have any questions about anything that I shared, please feel free to put them in the comments. Reach out to me. I am happy to get on a strategy call with you so we can go over some of these specific points as they are related to you. One of the things that I have found just being a mom, right, of a number of children is there's no cookie cutter way to approach anything. It involves you to really recognize who it is that you're talking to, because everybody's different. And so they're dealing with different things when it comes to accomplishing what they want out of life. And so your perspective may be different on a number of areas. But if you would like to have a strategy session to kind of go over that, feel free to reach out to me. I am just a touch away when it comes to social media because I'm everywhere, it seems like. So reach out to me, and I look forward to seeing you all next week All right. So my challenge for you today is think about what is one thing that you could do, that you could work on this week in order to begin to be more active in your listening with other people. That is all I have for today. And I'm wishing you a wonderful, fabulous, successful week. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.